What's the number of business acquisitions you've been involved in the last 24 months?
100 million. I see a lot where people are like, I'm a 7-figure business owner, 8-figure business owner. How much you actually taking from those businesses though? Because people ask me, what's like the overall revenue of the businesses? It's all good to say, I've got this company that does like 10, 12 million a year, but actually it doesn't. I went through a stage where people thought I hated property. So people were saying to me, why did you stop investing in property? I didn't stop. If someone offered me an incredible deal now, I would do it.
What type of deal do you think could entice you back into property? What would somebody have to present you numbers wise?
PBK podcast is sponsored by Faraway Pizza, the fastest growing pizza company in the UK. With over 160 stores, you can definitely find one near you. If you want a slice of their flavoursome pizza, then you can use our discount code PBK20 at faraway.co.uk to get 20% off. Once again, PBK20 at faraway.co.uk to get 20% off.
And we are back with another episode of the PBK podcast. Each and every week, we bring you an amazing guest. Now, today I've got Dee Ludlow. How you doing?
I'm good, you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, D of the 5D Club, previously of 5am Club.
Yeah.
Dee is the only man in history that has convinced me to wake up and be not active, not like on my way to the airport, but working at 5am during lockdown.
You made it.
I did. I was awake, right?
You're wide awake.
Exactly. I was there. That's like my claim to fame that I did that once, but never again. Don't care what my PT says, anyone says. I'm not doing 5am, 6am sessions.
I don't know. You did perform pretty well at that time. You know, it's a very watched back episode. So.
Okay. Well, that's always good. We appreciate that, but we're not doing it again. It was for you. That's why I said I must have like the. I mean, I know we met like during the point when everyone was kind of on Clubhouse and Instagram lives and all those things when we had to stay indoors, and I saw some of the stuff you were doing, and there was more crossover there. But for those that are not familiar with you, can you just give them a little insight into who is Dee and what do you do?
So now I'm mainly focused on buying businesses. I've been in business since I was probably like 15 really. My first, I didn't really run it like a business then, but that was my first business. It was like gardening, and then from there the goal was always to like get into property, because I went on like a rich dad poor dad seminar when I was 15.
Oh wow.
It was like no redemption mortgages, credit card deposits. It was like the Wild West. So I always thought when I'm old enough I want to do that, and then so I've dabbled in property, and then realized it wasn't really giving me what I wanted at the time. So in like a growth phase, probably the strategy I picked. So then I was like, just double down on business again. So yeah, that's been a bit of a mad journey really.
Well, it is, but I mean, in terms of, we're going to go back to the journey, but where you've got to with the buying businesses. I saw a stat. What's the number in terms of business acquisitions that either you've been involved in directly or assisted over the last sort of 24 months?
Now it's like over 30. So
over
over 30 deals.
30 what, sorry? 30 deals?
Yeah, over
what's
30
the value of those deals? Because I saw some numbers and they were looking...
Now it's closing in on like 100 million, but like probably like 80 something at the moment. Yeah.
No. And I think, for a lot of people, when they hear numbers, like in the millions, sometimes it can almost become demotivating for some people because it sounds so far away. But when you kind of break down what it looks like to buy businesses and how you can structure it with finance, I think for a lot of people, it's got no concept. Can you kind of give us the beginner's guide to buying businesses?
Yeah. There's a few ways to do it. I think just on the numbers you mentioned then, I know some of them can like seem so overwhelming for people and everyone loves big numbers, but a lot of the time I see a lot where people are like, I'm a 7-figure business owner, 8-figure business owner, but it's like, all right, how much you actually taking from those businesses though? Because like if people ask me sometimes like, oh, what's like the overall revenue of the businesses you own? But I think people focus on the wrong numbers because like
they're vanity metrics.
People chase revenue for one thing, but like, for instance, one of our companies is like in the automotive sector. So to make it an 8-figure company, you have to sell about 35 cars a month. But then the net margin is like sub 5%. So it's all good to say, oh yeah, I've got this company that does like 10, 12 million a year, but actually it doesn't, So I think that people do chase revenue and look for big numbers, but I think that is the wrong number to focus on. when it comes to actually buying a company, there's different ways you can do it. It's obviously different strategies like there is in property. So if you want to do a complete leverage buyout, which is where you take some form of loan to buy the business, then you can get, depending on what finance you use, you can get up to 90%, just like you could if you used to go and buy yourself a home against the business assets, or say invoice factoring. There's various different ways to do it. There's other ways you can do it. So if there's a business that's slightly distressed, there's methods like invoicing out, where like the £1 deal, where you buy a business through like a liquidation process and come out the other side. Of course, you have to be careful on that, because you're coming out with no working capital, which without that you can't do much for the business. And then there's other ways where, if you want to go for like true like no money down deals, which people can do, then if you have a skill set, or someone in your network that has a skill set, then you can offer a service to a business where you exchange that based on like KPIs of performance for equity down the line, but you get a retainer throughout the time that you're doing it. So there's so many ways you can do it. But if you're going to be looking at it through just the typical leverage buyout, which most people look at, then it really depends on the business, the sector, and lenders will treat it on a deal by deal basis.
And so you said sort of 90% sort of loan to value in terms of what they would offer is generally the cap in that leverage buyout section. Well, but where does it sort of sit as standard? Is that quite obtainable, or is it normally quite a bit lower than that?
It really depends on the business. Like some, you can get 100% asset finance sometimes, and sometimes over 110 or 120%. It really depends on the business, who's buying the business. There's loads of factors that can change what you can and can't get. And even like with invoice finance, some people will look at it and be like, oh, look, I got British Gas as one of the debtors. That's going to be easy to finance. But the lender may say that that's actually a risk, because they're a blue chip client. They can pull the plug at any time they want. They cannot pay whenever they want. So it really depends. And the lender will vet the debt as if it's debtor finance you're going for, but they'll also like look at the assets and look at, because for instance, if you're buying a scaffolding company, like the pipes and bores may be worth £1 million, but they're soft assets that they're probably not going to get anything for them. So it really does depend. Also, there's cash flow loans. So you can get up to 2.5 times EBITDA. So if you're buying a business, easy numbers, let's say is doing 100 grand profit. Let's say you're buying it 3 times and you're paying 50% up front. Then obviously with the cash flow loan, if you could get the full 2.5 times, then you can easily bridge the gap on a closing payment to buy the business. So some lenders are going to want skin in the game, some won't. Like I said, it really depends on what you're buying and who you are.
And I guess, for a lot of people, understanding that, like, there's a lot of detail, a lot of intricacies. You can tell that's really your space that you live, eat, breathe. Because even to be able to throw out all of that information so succinctly shows how you've been able to really navigate the space. What would you say are like some common pitfalls? Like whenever people hear stuff, like whether it be getting into property, whether it be trading, whether it be, buying businesses, it always sounds like, ta-da, all you do is turn up, say, yep, I've seen this, gonna buy it, now I'm gonna be the 7-figure business owner. What would you say are some of the most common pitfalls when people start looking at the space and mistakes people make?
I think that most people go into the space and they solely look for no money down deals, just like things property, really.
It's like the buzzword. It's like, all money out, no money down, whatever it is. Like, that sounds amazing on paper.
And of course you can do it, and they happen all the time. But I think if you approach it like, I'm doing this with no money and I want to buy a 7-figure business, I just think is the wrong way to go into it, because you're going to run into issues where if you don't, I think the most important thing overall is deal structure. So a lot of people go into it and they'll just try and force deals to happen without understanding deal structure. Like there's like debt service cover ratios that, in my opinion, if you don't abide by them, if you want to go and you go in to try and get loans anyway, then a lender's going to make sure that that's like 1.5 these days anyway. But realistically, I think that people forget just the base fundamentals of a business. And if you don't educate yourself on those, then you're going to have serious issues post-acquisition, because just management in general, you can buy something and it's like great management structure, great margins, no revenue concentration. All these things sound really good, but then for what you want to do with a business and for the management team to operate on their own without like a leader, if you want to take a more passive approach, then does the management team actually have the ability to do that? Because a lot of them don't. And then also, if you want to grow the business, I think the leadership of the business or the management team needs to be growing at least equal, if not higher, than the growth rate that you want of the business. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. So there's so many things that can go wrong. If you don't understand some of the parts of the due diligence process, yes, you can leave it and have a great team, but you still need to understand certain parts of that process. Yeah. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult when your accountant or your lawyer's saying this and this needs to happen, and you just have no idea of what's going on. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't have the right team or the right education.
And do you find, like, obviously a lot of people, like particularly in the social media space, we see success stories and we see them, so you think, I've got to just emulate that. So there may be people that maybe actually there's an amazing business and it's not your 7-8 figure business, but it's a really good 6-figure business that actually has really solid core underlying numbers, but they'll shy away from it because they want the wow moment of the 7-figure business and don't really do the due diligence based on.
Well, definitely. I think that people do chase. I think in general, if you focus on buying a bigger business, it is more practical because it does have like management structure. It has real systems and processes, and a lot of them, especially if they're being on for 15, 20, 30 years, it's weathered a few storms as well. But there's also some really good businesses that may do 500 grand revenue a year and they have 50% profit margin. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, wow, do I want to go and buy that business that does 10 million a year but earns 200 grand profit? Or this one here does 500,000 a year in revenue and there's 50% of that in net profit. So I think it's all down to the individual and how much you want to be involved and what you want to do with the business. But again, I think that people need to forget about chasing what it looks like for social media, because everyone's different. Like, we all want different things. Like, if 100,000 a year is going to change somebody's life, then maybe that's the criteria you need to start with, and that's the business you want to do. Because someone could be employed at the moment, which they earn 25, 30 grand a year, 100 grand a year, where they spend most of that time that they're given there in their own business is different. We've had someone that sold their entire crypto portfolio to buy a business, a PR company, but that PR company's placed Stephen Bartlett on a podcast. And so people like that, they've transitioned out of employment into buying a business. Yes, they may not have got much time back, but now they're working on themselves and they're earning 3 times what they was earning employed. So it's all down to you as an individual and what you want, I think.
Yeah, I think it's something that we speak about quite frequently, is actually, before you do the analysis on the business, do the analysis on yourself.
Definitely.
And definitely shy away from, if people are saying this is what you should do without knowing anything about you, they're probably not giving you advice for your benefit. They're probably giving you advice for their benefit.
Without a doubt. It's like the blind leading the blind. I think that's one thing that I think people do, they forget about, is how is it going to benefit them personally? Because I think that without like unpacking what someone needs for themselves, it's impossible to say to them, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
Like, whether that's business, property, trade, whatever it is you decide to do, it's easy to say to someone, oh, you need to just go and buy a business that does 500,000 profit a year. So, well, I don't need 500,000 profit a year, potentially, or their circumstances may be completely different. Whereas there could be somebody else that does need that. I just think that people focus on what everyone else is doing too much rather than focusing on themselves first.
And I think it's just a poor sales mentality. Like, I remember going to, I'm not a car person. I don't really know anything about cars, but I'm like, okay, I want a new car. And I'm in an hour in between 2 very different cars. So I'm asking someone who loves cars, like, you should definitely get this one. But they don't know why I want the car. Like, I might want a super, economic car, and you're going to tell me a car that only comes in a 5-litre engine. So I think you really have to, if you are in that sales space, like even outside of business and, property, just as a generalization, just listen, like, make sure you find out what people want before you start trying to pitch them on what you want to give them.
It's that instant gratification though. And I think that people rather take as much as, it's quite funny actually. So I heard Dana White say this recently about boxing and the difference between boxing and MMA. And he was like, boxing has got to a stage where every single event is a going out of business sale. So he's like, they want to try and get as much money as possible from every single event, like it is going out of business, rather than build it and look at the longevity like they're doing with like the UFC.
Yeah.
And I think that that's basically what everyone's doing now. It's like every single person they speak to is like, it's like a going out of business sale, or I need to just grab as much as I can now. And I always find that when you see people, especially in the social media space, it's like, oh, let's use you in 5 years, let's use you in 10 years, let's use you in 15 years. Because if you're actively going out there doing what you're doing, you'll be around, you know.
Yeah.
People still make mistakes. It is what it is, you know. Like most of the information that I've learned through business is because I've just been doing it. I've done a lot of things wrong. I've made loads of mistakes, and then I learned how not to do something again, you know. But it's easy to just read a couple of books and see a load of shiny objects on social media and be like, you know.
Yeah, you meet a lot of people that are really good. Like I call them like quote smiths. Yeah. Like they know all the best quotes. They sound super like, you know, they sound super well spoken, and they sound like they've got all of these amazing viewpoints. But then you realize it's just a lot of good quotes with no real substance behind it, and you have to do the business at the end of the day.
Do you know what's funny, right? Because of the space I'm in, and naturally speaking to, like when I wanted to really scale, I was talking to like PE funds, family offices, and I always felt that I needed this, like the credibility from like an academic perspective. So I was going and doing like online private equity valuation, like accreditations and business school accreditations, all online stuff. So if they check my LinkedIn or whatever,
you got the letters behind your name in certain places.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. And you actually find, you speak to people and it's like, what I found, and this is no disrespect to anyone like in finance who's done an MBA or whatever, but I found that a lot of those people that end up either joining 5D program or come from that background, they end up overthinking the whole thing because they're naturally very academic, and they've looked at the process and the way, you know, the different consultancy firms or investment banks show you how to do it. And they try and take that same approach at a small business level. And it's very different because they're obviously well capitalized for a start. They have incredible infrastructure and they have a lot of resources you can pull on to get things done. When it's just you and you're in the small business world, you can be so much more agile and flexible, and it's so different. And I think that people get tied up and then they overthink it. So yeah, I think that just take action and just get on with it. You'll learn a lot faster.
It definitely is very similar in property. Like I know a lot of people that have come from working for massive national house builders, worked on like £500 million worth of projects, and then they join the same thing, join the PBK community because they can't get a deal across the line, because the things that work in big business don't necessarily translate to a smaller scheme, like to build in 2 or 3 flats versus when they were building 2,000 or 3,000. You just can't have the same conversations. There isn't the luxury of being like, well, I'm just going to get a QS to do all of that, because they end up with build costs that cost the same amount as the GDV of the whole project.
Yeah, it's 100%. I think that a lot of it's people overthink, and everyone's looking for like the secret sauce and the industry secrets. But a lot of it is like, you just got to do it. You actually got to get out there and do it. And then places like your community, or in property, or mine, in business, or someone's trading community, that's like, they're good for support networks to like as soundboards to be like, right, you know, how do I do this? How do I do that? And you can follow a process, follow a course structure, but ultimately you need to go out there and do it at the end of the day. And I think that's one of the biggest issues in the sort of, whether it's a courses or communities, whatever it is the actual taking action part. People don't do it. And then a lot of them I see, especially in property, there's been a lot of like educators where they get blamed for it didn't fulfill on the promise, and some of them probably don't, but a lot of the time the individual just hasn't done anything.
Yeah, and I think that's where like the community structure really works, as you mentioned. I love that word sounding board, because for it to be a sounding board, you have to throw ideas at it. You can't just, I've turned up now, like, you know, turn up, give me my degree, give me my profits. It's like, no, you've got to go and do the work. My job is more from somebody who's been there and made the mistakes in an industry where mistakes are very costly. Let's help you stop making them. So be that person, say, hang on a second, have you considered X, Y, or Z? Or maybe you should like hire this person to do some further due diligence. But just giving people those contacts, that sounding board, to ensure that those costly mistakes aren't made. When you were in property, what strategies were you involved in?
It's BRR, buy to let.
Okay.
And the thing for me, like I went through a stage where people thought like I hated property, and it's like, it's because I think the questions that people was asking me, if you're in property, a lot of people, wherever it is you're doing, people naturally look for like confirmation bias. So if you say something that people don't like, they naturally get defensive rather than taking a step back and being like, okay, let me understand the counter argument and
rationale on
yeah,
your side, like.
and I think that, and I'm very much a person that I think that we need rational and irrational behavior for society to operate. And like, I think that you do need a bit of both, because some of the greatest ideas that prosper come from like irrational decision making sometimes. But I do think that you also need to peel it back and be like, right, let me take a bit of a rational approach to this and listen to the counter argument or the counter opinion, not argument. And so people were saying to me, like, why did you stop investing in property? It's like, I didn't stop. If someone offered me an incredible deal now, I would do it. It's not that I stopped doing it and hated it. It was a case for me is where I went very aggressive at the start. I probably picked the wrong area. I picked Wales because that's where I'm from. And I wanted to do as many deals as possible. I had this, I was going to ask.
No, I was going to say, whereabouts in Wales were you operating?
Mainly Newport and in the valleys,
okay,
right?
yeah.
So like that was a challenge, and
I've only been there, I think once or twice. I think I visited a couple of people's sites. Do you know what I think? Because obviously of the end values, but it's you still got the same people building. You still buy materials from the same places. A lot of the time, I was like, if something goes wrong, it goes. Obviously, you can buy cheap, but if you have a what if. Those what ifs can cost a lot of money and eat away a lot of the margins.
That's for me. That's where I think I made the wrong choice. Really, was buying. I think back then it was like 50 grand houses.
Yeah. These like the old coal miners sort of.
For me, it was like I said, probably wrong strategy for what I wanted out of it, and wrong area. But when you're looking at your average like sort of monthly cash flow of like 250 quid, I was like, to get 100 grand a year from this, I need like 400 houses, and like not only the time and effort that goes into that, the amount of money needed to go through, especially if you want to do it fairly quickly, just didn't make sense to me. And I understand that there was other strategies, like whether you wanted to develop or do HMOs or whatever it is you wanted to do. But it's like, now you need a lot more money to do the things people want. If you want to achieve those sort of numbers. And I just felt like it didn't make sense. Like I understand like why I really enjoyed yours and Alfred's like I don't say argument, but debate, conversation and debate on the different strategies, because I see both sides, and I think it's important to understand both sides. I think you made some really good points on understanding what you need from it as an individual. And like for me, if I was to do it all again, I wouldn't have done what I'd done. And I just quickly realized that this just isn't worth it. So for me to go and get like 100 grand a year, I could get like incredibly small business to produce that, rather than going through all that headache. And I know how fun it is at the start when you first dive into property and you start to understand like the build and working with builders and that design is so fun, but I think that early on you need to really understand what strategy is that you want to do and what you actually want to get out of it, rather than look for, I own loads of houses, I got all these keys. I think that's the wrong approach again. And
I think for a lot of people, like one of the reasons why people like property is they have it being tangible and more just a natural understanding of, okay, I'm going to take this house. If I've got no plaster on the walls, if I put some plaster on the walls and put some paint on the walls, furnish it nicely, it's going to be worth more. I think for a lot of people, when they're looking at their risk understanding and also the fact that there's a bricks and mortar valuation, that's why they like it. But I think what people often fail to do is understand why they like it. They just say they like it. So you may have lower margins, but based on your level of experience, I think for me, I'd say the upside if I was benchmarking it against other investment strategies, buying businesses, for example, is the fact that if you're really good at what you do, you can mitigate risk. But for somebody who's not yet confident at what I would do in that space, what property gives you is that kind of guaranteed bricks and mortar valuation, whereas you could end up with a business with a zero-sum valuation if it was run wrong effectively. And I think it's just understanding where those values are, what your personal risk tolerances are, and then also how you can gain the expertise to be able to mitigate those.
Risk appetite and time horizon is the two key factors, I think, in anything you invest in. And I think that's why yeah, it's good to chase all the shiny, or I say it's not good to chase all the shiny objects, and it's good to look at them all. But I think it's becoming a master at something that you really want to do long term. And if that's the thing that can get you to where you want to get to, then do it. And sometimes people do things just because they like it. But I think that the biggest thing I noticed improperly, and you've noticed in the business space too, is a lot of people I found was pushing people to go and take money off their family members or friends to go and do their first project before they actually understood how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I had a problem with was, and this is where people thought I just hated it. I'm like, I never once said I hated it. It was the fact that I seen a lot of people that was inexperienced, didn't have the right networks. If you have the right people around you, it's a little bit different. But they're going and doing projects, regardless of whether they're a 50 grand project or 500 grand project. They're taking a load of money from a family member before they really understand what they're doing.
Whether it's family member, somebody
anyone.
they've convinced is an investor. And I think that's where where we kind of, I say bonded is the right word, but found like, a very kind of like mutual ground. And I was very much the same as like, my thing is that I'm fearful with my own money, let alone somebody else's.
Yeah.
And I think, it's all well and good to say raise investor funding, but I think skin in the game is an important concept for a reason. Like, I always like even if I'm doing a deal with someone, to know that like, if we both lose together and we win together, and it means that people can't just think you've done me over because I am as tied into their deal as you are. I think it's definitely a problem if you are just raising funds on the basis, well, it's not my money anyway, so if it doesn't go to plan,
That was the biggest issue for me, was that I seen a lot of it happening. And when you're looking at that end value, if you get it wrong, because all you're doing, you're basing the end value on a calculation that you've worked out yourself and any due diligence that you've done. If you don't know how to do that due diligence, then that end value, if it's a 20 grand swing on a house that you bought for 50 grand and you've got to pay your investor back, it can go wrong very quickly. And then all of a sudden, if you're making 200, 300 quid a month on it, all of a sudden, how many years is it going to take to pay?
They're locked in a deal for the next 10 years.
Yeah. So that was the issue, I think, is that just making sure you either have the right network around you or you have the right education before you start going taking money off people. And I understand some people are starting with nothing. And I'm a massive advocate for someone that's young or not, getting into it and taking risks and taking chances to get what they want. I'm all for that. But I think that if you're doing it and you don't have anything when you start at the start, then make sure you have the right people around you, at least to make you going into it understanding what you're doing, rather than just taking somebody's money and running with it.
This is also where you touched on earlier about who's going to be here for a long time, because I think, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easy enough to just be like, well, quite carefree and to make some money once. Like anyone can get lucky once. But if you want to be here for the long term and you're going to have to live off your name, your reputation, your integrity, you can't just hope and gamble with other people's money. And I think that's one of the reasons why even in those conversations with Alfred and with other people, I often talk about, that raising investor finance, if you can create an ecosystem where, yes, you might raise after a while, but you can also use your own funds and then reinvest them alongside it. It's a great place to be. And also the value of actually something where you can learn before you have to put your fund, before somebody else's funds, your own funds forward. So things like deal sourcing, the types of deals that you hope to do. Because all of that conversation around being able to understand GDV and end numbers, a lot of people just rely on a deal sourcer to give them that. They're getting paid off the fact that you are going to buy the deal. So they're naturally going to massage those numbers to make sure you buy it. And now you've convinced somebody else based on, so it's almost like, when they say shit rolls downhill.
Yeah, it's true. I see it in the business space a lot, where with brokers, like we focus more on off market, just purely because I think that the business brokerage space is just so flawed. It's like if you were to list your family home today, and there was 2 estate agents, and one of them said, I can get you 3 million, and someone else said, I can probably get you 2.5. Who are you going to list with?
Yeah.
That's literally what business brokers do. It's crazy. And you have fairly what you'd class as savvy business owners that have gone and give some of the large brokerages like 40, 50 grand to list because they've told them they can go and get 10x for their business. And some businesses can sell for that. But like it's very hard then to manage expectations of someone selling their business if so they've been told like a ridiculous valuation. And the same as, like you said, deal sources, the people that are like the gatekeepers of it, they can make things go south quite quickly. And I totally agree with skin in the game, because when it's your own money, it's a completely different feeling, right? But it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, because if it's an investor's money, you should feel the same way about it, right? But it is, when at the start, a different feeling with your own money, because it's like, wow, I'm investing in this, and myself, and if it goes wrong, it's on me. But that's where I think it is important to do it yourself first, because then when you do have an investor's money, you do have that same feeling. And I'm not saying people don't, because people can actually have that same feeling, but that's key, I think, to make sure that if it goes wrong for both of you and the investor or whoever's involved.
No, definitely. What type of deal do you think could entice you back into property? What would you have to see? What would somebody have to present you numbers-wise? Thank you to those of you who have liked, shared, commented, but most importantly, subscribed to the channel. Did you know only 28% of people that regularly watch my videos have subscribed? Now, we're trying to get that to 40% so we can bring on bigger and better guests and make better content for you. So if you could do that right now, myself and my team would really appreciate it. Now back to the video. You can say, well, I'll have a bit of that.
Probably, I wouldn't want to probably be involved in much of it. I'd want something where, I don't know numbers. I'd want to, I say numbers wise, it'd probably have to be something that in like a 6-month period, you can earn multiple six figures. I'd have to probably receive like 50% return on my money. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't do it, unless it was something like commercial. I'm happy to invest in something commercial long term if it was in the right place and we was aiming for the right tenant. I don't want anything to do with residential.
So for those that are not familiar with, unlike residential property where, if something goes wrong for your tenants, you got to fix the boiler, the roof, this, that. With commercial property, you're basically just saying, you signed your commercial lease, that is now a you problem. So you're saying if it's property, it's got to be fully hands-off, passive, just give me my ROI if it makes sense. That's where you're living in a property space. Do you think that's where you are with business as a whole now? Do you think you're very like just ROI led, or do you think you have any passion projects?
I probably don't have any passion projects. I just, for me,
we got to get you on the paddle, and then when you become addicted to paddle, then we'll convince you into investing into like a 4% ROI, but you get to be the owner of a paddle court and play as much as you like.
I think that for me, the end goal, I don't know what the actual end goal is really, but like we already invest in people's deals inside the 5D community. I'd like to do that on a much larger scale. That's what I'd really like to do, is to have a fund that's dedicated solely for people that are coming in. We can partner. I think that for me, that's what I'd like, because you see people, it's life changing for them.
It's funny. It's like, I've said that as well, that in the community space, it's like the golden ticket is like for somebody to just basically give you a credit line. Like a family office to say, Dee, we've seen what you've done over the last 5-10 years in business. Here is your credit line, effectively like a massive overdraft. Whenever you need it, drawdown facility on the funds. Invest in the businesses that you like because we trust you. And I think that's, from an investor perspective, once you've built credibility, that's really like the dream, isn't it? For just to be able to like, look, here's my access to funds. I know I've got to pay for them, but as and when I use them, we'll invest. They make money, we make money. And also you get to help those people that have had faith in you. They've gone out there, they found the deals, gone the director the director owner stuff, been able to make it work. Because it's always upsetting when they get all that way and then there's a barrier of the funds. You're trying to see how it can work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that with yourself then, with knowing that you have the experience yourself, and if you've got the right team around you, you can support them and help them through it. I think it's a little bit different then. And we've done it where, we've signed PGs on behalf of other people because I believe in them as a leader and what they're trying to do, and like they're trying to do a roll up in their own sector, and I'm happy to help in those areas because everyone benefits. But I think that the more inexperienced people, if there was like credit facility there, then you could be like, okay, cool, we need to draw down an additional amount, whatever that figure is, because we need to bring a consultant or someone that has real industry experience here to help you grow it. We can help you, but you may have to take less of a slice here because someone else needs to come to the table for this to work. I think that would help people massively because then they could learn from those individuals too. So yeah, that would be something that we'd like to do at some point.
You mentioned briefly, like you're not sure what the long-term goal is. How much do you get kind of caught up in, I need to get there? Or how much are you enjoying the journey at the moment?
So recently I've gone back to enjoying it because forever I was just like, I need to get this figure or I need to get to this place. And then
what was that figure?
100 mil liquid. But it wasn't until it was actually a family member of mine. He's done incredibly well. We're actually business partners now. But he went through multiple exits to biggest private equity firm in the world, done incredibly well. And he asked me what your figure is. And I told him, he's like, well, why? And he's a very emotionally intelligent person. And I was like, I don't know. It's just so weird, just a number. And
I feel like sometimes you might do a podcast and it's like a number that you say, and then now I've got to almost run with that because I've said it out loud now.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's true. And when he said like, what does that number get you? And what I actually wanted, I can get a far smaller number, and like a much smaller number. And I think it was just a figure like I want to be able to get to that. But then every time I've hit any milestone or done something that I really felt at some point I want to do that in my life, it's over like really, it's always underwhelming when you do it. It's never what you thought it was going to be. And when they say the chase is always better than the kill, it's so true. Like 100%. When you look back at it, you're like, actually, that was actually quite fun. So now I'm trying to enjoy things more and more rather than just focus on a certain number. But obviously there's things that I want to do in life and for my family and whatever, but it'll come when it comes.
Yeah, I think it's a very good lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs at different stages, because it doesn't matter if it's from you seeing £100 in your bank to £1,000. Every time you add a zero, like you're 10xing, but it doesn't always have that same feeling you think it would.
No.
And a lot of the time it's like, for me personally in property, like I've had tiny projects where it's just like when the electrics get connected and the second fix is finally on, I first see, like, I don't know, the outside lights on the courtyard go on. And I'm like, that was the moment I was like, oh, this is nice. Yeah. This is when I completed and we get all the money back in, it's just like, I want to the next because I've got something else to do now. So I think you really got to, like you said, enjoy the chase over the kill.
Yeah, but I think that's where it comes to that, like the fulfillment part of it is just those little things at the start, because it's I think that's why it's probably so good, because like the vision it becomes reality in a fairly, like, can take long, but a short period of time in the grand scheme of things. And it's like, this looked like this and now it looks like this. So yeah, I think it is important along the way to.
Have you ever had a moment like that in the business buying space?
Yeah, I've had a few deals that I was like, wow, that's crazy that's happened. But because everything's so constant, something always needs doing. Yeah. It's just, I feel like it's hard to really have that feeling on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Because I think I've seen, like, I had it with like a property that we bought. And it was a property that was someone's old family home. It didn't really go well, and it got unfortunately repossessed. We did it up really nice and sold. And then I think I just got a message from like one of the children of the person who unfortunately got repossessed. And they were just like, look, obviously it's not my home anymore, but like, it's just so nice to see the house back being like what it once was, like how I remember it, because a nice house in a nice area. And it ended up, being used for all sorts of different, like, illicit purposes. And I can imagine, like, in the business space, maybe someone has spent a long time building a business that unfortunately falls on hard times for whatever reason. And then, and then seeing it actually remain functional in the same capacity must be.
Yeah, I think it's the people, I think, is the biggest thing, is when you see someone that either post acquisition they live up to their role and they want to do more, where previously it's not like the previous owner like capped them, but their ideas didn't really go to where they wanted to go. That's really fulfilling, and people's the hardest part of the whole thing. It's just it's the same with both property and business. They underpin everything, and it's like and recruitment's hard, Staff retention's even harder. So there's always different things you have to do to try and definitely retain staff and talent.
How do you stay focused and stay motivated?
I'm quite naturally like a go-getting mindset. I always have been. So I've never really. I know mindset's the biggest thing, but fortunately, I've never really had to. Not that I don't work on it, but I'll just do it anyway. I've just always been that type of person. So, which probably doesn't help anyone listening that needs mindset. But
just said, I'm great at it. It's all right. I've always done it. Don't worry.
I don't know. I just always been a kid that wanted to. If I do something, I need to be the best at it, or I need to get in the top 1%, and I'll just do whatever it takes to get there. And I think that most people just overthink stuff. I've never really been scared of failure, which I think is the biggest thing. Which I think my dad like instilled that into me. Like, just don't worry, just go and do it, try it. Don't worry about failure. So yeah.
I'm like the opposite, you know. I'm like proper scared of failure.
Yeah.
Like, but to the point that I feel like I can't fail because I don't know what I would do if I failed.
Yeah. Like, because of obviously having children now. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't think about that could potentially happen and what that would have impact on them, but if I'm doing something, I'm going to do it. Like, I will be a little bit more risk adverse in some areas because of family, but whereas if I didn't have children, I'd just go for anything probably. But so yeah, but I think that also risk aversion is the difference in getting to where someone wants to be and where some people don't ever unfortunately get to, because I think that can hold people back massively.
What about burnout? From always being busy, like, because you've said since 15. That's something I don't want to give his age away. But it's a couple of decades. I think.
It is.
A couple of decades that you've been grafting. Like, have you never had a point in that time where you're just like, I want to pack it in. It's too much.
Oh yeah, loads of times I've thought I want to pack it in because it's hard. But only once I've ever like experienced burnout, and I didn't really feel like it was burnout until now looking back. Like, we was a startup and it was so hard, and it was like a meal prep company, but it was like you could grab and go, and we managed to secure it in 16 shopping centres in the UK. We went into the first one, and I ended up just being so involved in day-to-day operations, which I hate. And I remember the amount of hours, I can't even remember what I was doing, but I remember dropping the kids off at my mum's. I even had Shara working day-to-day, and we'd just had another baby, and I remember going to my mum's and I laid down and I just fell asleep on the floor. And I woke up like 3 hours later, and I never ever did that. You know, I don't really sleep too much, and I don't know, my body obviously needed it. So that's probably the closest I felt to burnout. But I just find a way to
How did you like overcome? Like, was it just a case of you just got to get up and just keep going? Or did you have to take some time for yourself at that point?
Oh no, I just next day just carried on doing it. Honestly, I feel like you can always do more, and not that it's good for you. You know, I do try and look after my health and whatever, watch what I eat and try and get sleep and exercise, but I just try not to overthink anything. I just think I'll just keep going and going. And like, if a time comes where I feel that I need time, I'll just take it, you know.
It's good. I think it's good. So I think you've got to be a bit careful. Like, I'm saying this as like as a friend.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's nice to obviously always keep going, but like, we can't keep going to our own detriment. Like,
I agree.
We are our own engines. We need servicing. We need oil. We need the occasional spark plugs, and sometimes you just need a little resty. But if it's working for you, so I guess before I let you go, we're gonna how do you switch off? Because this seems like, from what I'm getting, is that you're go. You left behind the 5 a.m., but I know you still are an early riser. Like, how do you switch off? Like, where's your time?
So it used to be sport until I had an injury. I used to like football, basketball, boxing. They're the things I really liked. Unfortunately, I can't do them at the moment. So now I've play golf. That's good because it's like 4 hours where I really put my phone up. It gives me something to focus on. It's not as fast paced as I'd like it, because I'd like fast paced things. That and like travel with family. Like, there's nothing more. Like, even though I love travel and I like traveling on my own as well, I like my own space. I'm like an introverted person, but I can be an extrovert around people I like. Otherwise, I don't know. I get in environments where I just need to just be on my own. But there's nothing more that I love than being away and seeing my kids happy. That's like, that's when you feel like, oh, that's why I do this, is because of that. So
That's the way.
that's probably the main things, really.
It's nice, and we appreciate having you. I know it's been
Yeah.
busy. I know you probably got laptop, got meetings on the train to do on the way
But
back.
I came here with no laptop today. I
Oh,
just,
you did?
yeah,
A little day off.
yeah,
Little day
yeah.
off. Well, that's lovely. We appreciate it. Dee, for those that don't already have you on socials, how can they connect with you? How can people reach out to you?
I'm probably most active on Instagram, so it's D_Ludlow, and I got a YouTube channel. I try and make content every so often, do some all access stuff, but as and when I can, really. But yeah.
That's nice. All right. Well, that has been another episode of the PBK podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And we will be back next week with another special guest.